Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. In 2001, just 4 years after the first Harry Potter novel was published, Warner Brothers gifted us a film that became a true cultural phenomenon. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone grossed over $1 billion, received 3 Oscar nominations, and was hailed as one of the most faithful book-to-screen adaptations. Almost. Yes. Director Chris Columbus tried his best to preserve the spirit of the original, but some parts of the book never made it to the screen. Some details got lost, others were deliberately left out. So let's dive into the depths of nostalgia and ask ourselves, how does the movie differ from the book? Enjoy watching. Number 1. Departure to Hogwarts. The movie skips straight from Diagon Alley to the train station. We see Hagrid and Harry walking along the platform, and everything seems perfectly logical. But if we're being accurate, a whole month passed between those scenes, because after shopping, Harry actually returned to the Dursleys. It was July 31st, and he spent all of August enduring their mockery about platform 9 3/4. Only on September 1st did they reluctantly drive him to King's Cross. Too bad the film robbed us of this comical scene. Number 2. The Path to the Philosopher's Stone. In the film, the trio passes through Devil's Snare, crosses the giant chessboard, and faces Quirrell. But in the book, the journey is much more intense. First off, Quirrell had already dealt with one of the Guardians, the Troll. And unlike in the film, Hermione solves a logic puzzle designed by Professor Snape. On the line were several bottles of potion, only one of which would allow someone to move forward. This scene perfectly highlighted Hermione's intellect. Why was it cut? A mystery worthy of Hogwarts itself. Number 3. Norbert the Dragon. The movie reduces the dragon subplot to the bare minimum. Norbert appears, Draco tattles, and moments later, the dragon is just gone somewhere. But the book gives us much more. Ron gets bitten and ends up in the hospital wing, and the gang decides to secretly send Norbert to Ron's brother Charlie in Romania. Harry and Hermione sneak up to the astronomy tower under the invisibility cloak, risking being caught. And yes, they do get caught. A tense and well-written scene that was completely omitted. Number 4. Peeves. Sharp-eyed readers surely remember Peeves the poltergeist, always causing trouble for students, especially first years. Small, mischievous, dressed in wild colours with a bell-covered cap. He was part of Hogwarts' unique flavour. But in the movies, he's just gone. Not in Philosopher's Stone, not in any of the others. Apparently, the producers thought Peeves was too chaotic for the run time. Number 5. The Forbidden Forest. In the film, Harry, Hermione, Draco and Neville serve detention in the Forbidden Forest. But in the book, Ron doesn't go. He's still recovering in the hospital wing after Norbert. Neville takes his place, having overheard Draco's plan to tattle and tried to warn Harry and Hermione. That's why he ends up in the forest too. Also in the book, Hagrid initially pairs Draco with Neville, but Draco scares him for fun, triggering a flare signal and a team reshuffle. That detail added tension and character depth, something the film version lacked. Number 6. Hagrid's handmade flute. Remember the scene with Fluffy, the 3-headed dog? In the movie, all we know is that music puts the dog to sleep. But where did that music come from? In the book, Harry uses a flute gifted to him by Hagrid for Christmas. In the movie, the sound source is unclear and the gift is never mentioned. A small omission, maybe, but it's details like these that build a magical world. Number 7. The Midnight Duel. Did it feel like the trio got to Fluffy a little too easily in the movie? In the book, it unfolds differently. After Harry becomes a flying hero, Malfoy challenges him to a midnight duel in the trophy room. Naturally, Harry shows up with Ron and Hermione, and Neville, who couldn't get back to the dormitory. Of course, Malfoy never intended to duel. He simply wanted to set Harry up for Filch. That's how the kids end up at the Forbidden Corridor with the 3-headed dog. Admit it. This makes a lot more narrative sense than just stumbling upon it. Number 8. Draco's first encounter with Harry. Madame Malkin's robe shop was quiet when Harry stepped in. He was small, nervous, and completely alone in the wizarding world. Then another boy entered, pale, sharp-featured, with a smug little face. They were both being fitted for school robes, standing on stools side by side. The boy began talking without invitation. He boasted about Quidditch, about his father, and then casually said, "I really don't think they should let the other sort in, do you? They're just not the same. They've never been brought up to know our ways." He was talking about Muggleborns, and he had no idea he was talking to Harry Potter. Harry didn't respond, but something inside him recoiled. That moment, awkward, quiet, and unassuming, planted the seed of dislike. Harry didn't yet know about Slytherin or pure-blood ideology, but he knew enough to recognize arrogance and cruelty. In the film, their rivalry begins at Hogwarts when Malfoy offers Harry his hand and says, "You'll soon find out that some wizarding families are better than others." But by skipping the robe shop scene, the movie lost something important. That first meeting wasn't about houses or bloodlines. It was about instinct. Harry knew before anyone told him that this boy was the kind of person he never wanted to become. Number 9, Hermione's vow. After their narrow escape from the three-headed dog, Hermione was pale and furious, not at Harry or Ron, but at herself. In the movie, she moves on quickly. In the book, she's shaken. She stares at the trapdoor and says, through clenched teeth, "We could have been killed, or worse, expelled." Then she does something unexpected. She swears she'll never break another rule again. It's not dramatic, it's quiet, embarrassed. "I'm going to bed," she says, "before either of you come up with another clever idea to get us killed, or worse, expelled." The boys laugh, but she means every word. That small vow shows how deeply Hermione values rules. She clings to them like a safety net. Raised in a Muggle world, entering Hogwarts is like falling into a whirlpool of chaos. Rules give her order, structure, but more than that, they give her a way to earn respect. She's not from a magical family. She works twice as hard to prove she belongs. And breaking the rules, even for a good reason, shakes her. It's one of the first cracks in her perfect armor. This is where her arc begins. The film skips the vow, but the book plants it like a seed. Over time, Hermione grows from a girl terrified of detention to a friend who risks everything for those she loves. She will break the rules again and again. But the fear in her voice that night stays with the reader. It reminds us that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing what's right in spite of it. Number 10, The Mirror of Erised. Harry stared into the mirror of Erised and saw something he had never truly known, his parents. They stood beside him, smiling. His mother's eyes were like his father's hair stuck up just like his did. The film shows this once, briefly. One visit, one tearful glance, and it's over. But in the book, Harry returns night after night. He sneaks out under the invisibility cloak, sits in the cold room, and just watches. He had to see them again. He had to look at them. He memorized their faces like a starving boy studying a feast he could never touch. Each time, he stayed longer. He began to notice new figures, his grandparents, uncles, cousins, people he never met, people he would never meet. But he clung to the illusion. Ron tried to warn him. So did Dumbledore. It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live, but Harry didn't want to live without them, not yet. He had spent 11 years in a cupboard. These reflections were more real to him than the Dursleys ever were. Dumbledore moved the mirror, not to hide the stone, but to protect Harry from himself. The pull of the mirror was too strong. It was not just a magical object, it was a trap, a quiet one. The film left this danger unexplored. It gave us sorrow but not obsession. The book gave us a boy aching for love so deeply he nearly drowned in his own reflection. Number 11. The Quidditch Match Experience. The Quidditch match in the film was fast and dazzling. The music swelled, the camera spun, and within minutes, Harry caught the snitch. Exciting, yes, but hollow. There was no real sense of the game, no strategy, no tension, just CGI and speed. But in the book, that first match was an event. It wasn't just about Harry flying, it was about the world watching him. It was about proving himself, not as the boy who lived, but as a seeker. Fred and George Weasley guarded the hoops. Oliver Wood called out formations. Angelina Johnson raced past a bludger. Readers saw everything, how the teams worked, how the game unfolded. Lee Jordan's commentary filled the air with energy. And the quaffle is taken immediately by Angelina Johnson of Gryffindor. What an excellent chaser that girl is, and rather attractive too. "Jordan!" McGonagall snapped. But Lee kept going. The crowd roared with every goal. It felt alive. Even Neville was swept up in the moment. He sat frozen on the stands, holding only one side of his binoculars. He was too nervous to notice, too focused on Harry's wild flight. When Harry's broom jerked and dived, controlled by a jinx, the scene turned dangerous. Hermione rushed to Snape, convinced he was behind it. The game became more than sport, it became survival. And when Harry finally caught the snitch in his mouth, crashing to the ground in shock, the whole stadium went mad. Wood nearly fainted with joy because the film skipped all of that. No Lee Jordan, no commentary, no strategy, just a shiny sequence with a golden ball. But in the book, the match wasn't just fun, it was magic. It was Hogwarts in full colour. It was students cheering, professors shouting, and Harry learning that he could shine, not because of a scar, but because he belonged in the sky. Number 12. Hogwarts, a history. On the train to Hogwarts, Ron asked how Hermione knew so much. She replied without hesitation, "I've learned all our course books by heart, of course. I just hope it will be enough. I've also got a few extra books for background reading, and this one's my favourite, Hogwarts, a history." That line alone said everything. Hermione didn't just memorize spells. She studied the world she was about to enter. She came from a non-magical family. Magic terrified her and thrilled her. That book was her shield, her flashlight in the dark. In the book, it's Hogwarts, a history that tells her about Platform 9 3/4. She's the one who explains to Harry that the magical platform isn't marked, but the book describes exactly how to access it. She reads about the enchantments on Hogwarts Castle, how electronic devices don't work, how magic interferes with modern technology, how the staircases move. In every strange situation, she draws strength from the knowledge in those pages. That detail builds her character. It shows how hard she worked just to feel like she belonged. But in the film, there's no mention of the book. Hermione simply knows everything without context. Her intelligence becomes less about effort and more about convenience. Her Muggle background fades into the background. Yet in the book, Hogwarts, a history, is more than a source of facts. It's Hermione's link to a world she desperately wants to understand. It's her way of fitting in, of proving she's not just smart, she's prepared. She didn't have a magical childhood. She built her knowledge from scratch. Later in the series, Ron gets annoyed when she quotes from the book again. "Honestly, Hermione, if you're going to keep pulling Hogwarts, a history on us," he groans. But that's what makes her so real. She leans on information the way others lean on instinct. The film skipped that part of her journey, but the book showed us a girl who fought to belong, not with a wand, but with a library card. Number 13. Neville's heroic moment. Neville Longbottom stood trembling in front of the portrait hole. His round face was pale, but his voice didn't shake. "You can't go out," he said. "You'll get us all in trouble again." It was late at night. Harry, Ron, and Hermione were about to leave the Gryffindor common room to stop Quirrell, but Neville, clutching the courage he barely believed he had, stepped in their way. For once, he wasn't the clumsy boy with a toad and a lost remembrall. He was a Gryffindor trying to do the right thing. Hermione pointed her wand. "Petrificus totalis!" Neville fell like a statue. In the film, that moment was barely a passing scene, almost comic, but in the book it became something far greater. The next day, the entire school gathered in the Great Hall. Dumbledore awarded points, 50 to Ron, 50 to Hermione, and 60 to Harry. Gryffindor and Slytherin were tied. Then Dumbledore spoke again. His eyes sparkled behind his half-moon glasses. It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends. 10 points to Neville Longbottom. Gasps. Cheers. The hourglasses shifted, and the emeralds of Slytherin fell, replaced by Gryffindor rubies. Those 10 points changed everything. Not just the score, not just the house cup. They changed how students saw Neville. The shy boy who once forgot the password had found his voice. It wasn't strength of spell or muscle. It was moral strength, something Hogwarts rarely rewarded. But that night, the youngest Gryffindor in the room became a hero. He didn't face trolls or dark wizards. He faced his friends and said no. By cutting this from the film's ending, the story lost a vital piece. Neville's arc, quiet and slow, had finally bloomed. His moment stood in contrast to Harry's. One charged into danger, the other tried to protect the rules. Both were brave, both were necessary. That final award wasn't just about points, it was about seeing greatness in unexpected places. And in the shadows of giants, Neville Longbottom stood tall. Number 14, the Sorting Hat and Harry's Choice. The Sorting Hat rested heavily on Harry's head, and the room around him seemed to vanish. In the movie, this scene lasted only a few seconds. A quick suggestion, you could be great in Slytherin, and then the hat shouted, Gryffindor. The audience barely saw Harry hesitate, but in the book, that moment stretched out like a silent war. The hat did not simply suggest Slytherin, it tried to convince him. You could be great, you know, it's all here in your head, and Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness, no doubt about that. Harry sat frozen on the stool, fists clenched under the folds of his robe. He didn't say anything aloud, but his thoughts were frantic. Not Slytherin, not Slytherin, he repeated again and again. The hat heard every word. Not Slytherin, eh? It replied, almost amused. The tension was real. Harry, only 11 years old, was already standing at a fork in the road. He had never heard of Voldemort's time at Hogwarts, never knew what Slytherin truly meant, but his gut rejected it. The hat saw his ambition, his drive, his hunger to prove himself, but it also saw his heart. This internal battle, which took nearly 4 minutes in real time, was far more than a sorting ceremony. It was Harry's first moment of personal agency in the wizarding world. He could have let the hat decide for him. He could have gone to Slytherin, where he might have grown powerful and cunning. Instead, he chose to resist. The hat warned him, well, if you're sure, better be Gryffindor, and gave in. That moment mattered. It told us something important. Harry wasn't shaped by his abilities, he was shaped by his choices. By simplifying the scene, the film lost a key piece of Harry's character arc. His fear of Slytherin wasn't just about house rivalry, it was about identity. The voice in his head tempted him with greatness, but Harry pushed back. He didn't want to be great if it meant becoming something he didn't understand. That resistance to darkness, even when offered power, was the seed of what would make him a hero. Number 15, Diagon Alley. The moment Harry stepped into Diagon Alley, in the book, the entire world of magic cracked open before his eyes. It wasn't just about buying supplies for school. It was his first true immersion into a life he had never imagined belonged to him. Rowling didn't rush this revelation. She lingered in the details, letting readers savor every bit of wonder along with Harry. Harry wished he had 8 more eyes, the narration says, and it's true. He was overwhelmed, delighted, and finally, for once in his life, seen. In the film, however, this entire experience was condensed into a quick montage, a swirl of magical activity, but with no time to breathe. Hagrid takes Harry through the alley, a few purchases are made, and before we know it, they're on the way to King's Cross. The scene becomes a transition rather than a transformation. In the book, Harry's experience of Diagon Alley is deliberately slow, tender, and layered. The text walks us through the sights and sounds as if Rowling is guiding us by the hand. A grubby little pub called the Leaky Cauldron is the gateway between the Muggle world and the magical one. When Harry enters, it's not just a door he's stepping through, it's an initiation. People recognize him. They know his name. For the first time, he isn't invisible. Tom the barman shakes his hand, Professor Quirrell stutters a greeting, and everyone treats Harry not as a burden, but as a miracle. This social awakening is absent from the film. The Leaky Cauldron scene is muted, barely registering as a moment of significance. Once through the brick wall, the book doesn't push Harry into stores straight away. Instead, it lets him marvel at the streetscape. There were shops selling robes, shops selling telescopes and strange silver instruments Harry had never seen before. He sees a shop with brooms racing each other in the window. He's struck dumb by the exoticness of it all. Goblin-run Gringotts, barrels of bat spleens, towers of spellbooks. There's time, space, and emotional depth in the text that the movie omits. The film gives a glimpse of the architecture of bustling shoppers, but not of Harry's inner world, not of his awe or his wonder. It's spectacle without soul. One of the most poignant moments in the book is when Harry first receives money from his vault at Gringotts. This isn't just about finances, it's a metaphorical inheritance. For a boy raised in a cupboard, owning something, anything, is revolutionary. The Dursleys couldn't have known how much gold was in there, or they'd have had it from him faster than blinking. It's a pivotal moment. Harry learns he has value, history, and a past that matters. The film unfortunately brushes past this emotional turning point. Gringotts becomes a brief visual tour, a roller coaster ride through the underground, but the significance of the vault and what it means for Harry's identity is lost. In the book, Harry doesn't just follow Hagrid like a tourist. He's active in the experience. He stops at shop windows, peeks into cauldrons, listens to conversations. The narration shows us his shifting emotions: excitement, disbelief, nervousness. When he buys his robes from Madame Malkin's, he meets Draco Malfoy for the first time, a conversation that plants the seeds for future conflict. This moment is excluded entirely from the film, even though it adds both depth to Harry's social journey and foreshadowing for the plot. Draco's offhand comments about blood purity and Quidditch start shaping Harry's understanding of how the magical world is divided. The book also gifts Harry his first taste of kindness and normalcy. While shopping, Hagrid buys him an ice cream, chocolate and raspberry with chopped nuts. It seems like a small detail, but for Harry, it's monumental. It was the best birthday he had ever had, Rowling writes, emphasizing how every bit of that day stitched together a sense of belonging. The film doesn't give us this emotional satisfaction. It's all function and no feeling. There's no ice cream, no long walks, no lingering moments of delight. The camera glides through the alley, but it doesn't allow us to inhabit it as Harry does in the book. The sense of wonder is built through accumulation in the text. Harry sees an owl emporium, smells roast meat wafting from a cauldron shop, hears the bubbling of potions in the window. He watches as a witch weighs dragon livers, he overhears a goblin muttering in his strange tongue, and he feels the heat of a fire-breathing cauldron near his cheek. All of this isn't background, it's the emotional crescendo of a child finding his world. In the movie, these sensations are hinted at, but they're not built upon. There's no emotional crescendo, just a quick tour. Buying the wand at Ollivander's is another crucial scene that suffers from compression in the film. The book carefully constructs it as a mystical, near-spiritual moment. Mr. Ollivander's pale eyes shimmer as he talks about wands, about how the wand chooses the wizard. Harry tries wand after wand, creating sparks, smashing vases, feeling surges of magic. When he finally finds his wand, he feels a sudden warmth in his fingers. In the film, this is a visually memorable scene, yes, but it doesn't carry the same weight. The cinematic Ollivander is eerie but rushed. The mystical connection between Harry and the wand, especially its shared core with Voldemort's, is underexplored. The purchase of the wand in the book is immediately followed by Ollivander's cryptic comment, "He who must not be named did great things. Terrible, yes, but great." It's a chilling line that stays with Harry. It begins his slow reckoning with his own fame, with the complex legacy of his scar. The movie delivers this line, but without the same gravity. The book allows the moment to linger. Harry walks away uneasy, troubled, unsure. It's not just about magic, it's about destiny. That tension is diminished in the cinematic version, where pacing trumps introspection. Number 16, Professor Binns. In the pages of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Hogwarts breathes with life, not just through its bustling corridors or magical staircases, but through its cast of eccentric, ghostly, and unforgettable characters. One of them is Professor Cuthbert Binns, a figure so overlooked in the film adaptation that most movie-only fans might never suspect he even existed. Yet in the book, Binns is a peculiar fixture of magical academia, a ghost who continues teaching history long after his own death, embodying the dry, unchanging passage of time that he so faithfully recounts to generations of inattentive students. Professor Binns isn't merely a ghost, he's a symbol of how magic in the wizarding world doesn't always serve excitement or adventure. Sometimes it lingers in the mundane, in the endless repetition of dusty facts. Rowling introduces him not with drama, but with a tone of casual absurdity that makes him instantly memorable. Professor Binns had been very old indeed when he had fallen asleep in front of the staff room fire and got up next morning to teach, leaving his body behind him, she writes with quiet wit. This detail alone captures the surreal charm of Hogwarts, a place where the ghost of a professor is too dedicated or too oblivious to stop teaching just because he's died. In the film adaptation, this character is entirely absent. The role he played in the plot, most notably introducing the legend of the Philosopher's Stone and its creator Nicholas Flamel, is reassigned to Hermione, who reads it out from a book. This change, though efficient in a cinematic sense, deprives viewers of a unique magical flavor. The classroom scene where Binns reluctantly discusses Flamel after persistent questioning from Hermione, Harry, and Ron is one of the few times he deviates from his usual monotony, revealing that even the most routine-bound characters can be nudged out of their inertia by student curiosity. This decision to exclude Binns changes not only the pacing of the story, but also alters the atmosphere of Hogwarts. The school in the book is filled with oddities that feel simultaneously nonsensical and alive. Binns adds to that atmosphere not by being charming or beloved, but by being the exact opposite. He's so tedious that nearly every student zones out during his lectures. Professor Binns opened his notes and began to read in a flat drone, like an old vacuum cleaner, Rowling writes, capturing the timeless and inescapable quality of his history lessons. The image of a ghost, shuffling through centuries of magical warfare with complete indifference to his audience, makes history at Hogwarts feel strangely eternal, like something that exists outside of time. Yet ironically, it is Binns who brings to the story the first solid clue about the Philosopher's Stone. When Harry and his friends try to understand the mystery behind Nicholas Flamel, they find no answers in the library. It's only after Hermione proposes asking Binns that they gather in his classroom, where he dismisses their interest in what he calls nonsense. "Flamel, I suppose," he says begrudgingly, before revealing that Flamel is the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone. This moment, though brief, is crucial. It cements Binns not just as a comic detail, but as a necessary key to the unfolding mystery. The fact that he resists the topic so stubbornly, insisting that the legend of the stone is pure myth, adds a layer of skepticism to the magical world. Binns represents the academic establishment, slow to change, resistant to speculation, and deeply rooted in structure. His reluctance to even discuss the stone emphasizes how secretive and mysterious this object is. It also sets the stage for the students to take the mystery into their own hands. If even a history professor denies the stone's existence, how much deeper must they dig to uncover the truth? The atmosphere of his classroom, with its cold and dusty air, is itself a reminder that not all magic is vibrant or alive. Some of it is stale, forgotten, and buried in centuries-old records. This tension between the fantastical and the dreary is part of what makes Hogwarts so real. A world where a boy can fly on a broomstick should also be a world where students fall asleep during ghost-led lectures. The texture of the school, its worn, sometimes boring, sometimes bizarre fabric, is what gives it depth. Binns may be lifeless, but his presence adds life to the setting. In removing Binns from the movie, the filmmakers also removed one of the book's more subtly comedic elements. He is not funny in an overt sense, but in the same way that watching a man ignore the fact that he is dead is funny. The absurdity of his continued existence is a kind of humour that adds to the book's tone. It's not slapstick, nor is it particularly whimsical. It's the dry British humour that permeates so much of Rowling's writing. Without him, the film loses one of the book's strangest, most inexplicable details, and with it, a layer of its charm. More importantly, Binns is part of a larger pattern in the book. Adults in the wizarding world who are disconnected from the problems of the students. Like Snape, who terrifies them, or Dumbledore, who withholds crucial information, Binns is another authority figure who doesn't see what's really going on. When Harry and his friends ask about Flamel, he responds with scholarly detachment, unaware that the students are unraveling a genuine threat. This contrast between adult obliviousness and student intuition is one of the driving themes of the series, especially in the early books. What's remarkable is that Rowling never condemns Binns. She doesn't portray him as malicious or even particularly flawed. He simply is. He exists in a kind of academic limbo, untouched by the drama around him. His very indifference to the stone's existence or the student's well-being makes him a reliable narrator in a sense. He's not trying to manipulate or deceive. When he says something, it's because he believes it's true. That honesty, even wrapped in boredom, becomes valuable. Number 17, Harry and Snape. Professor Severus. Snape's presence in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone casts a long, cold shadow over Harry's first year at Hogwarts. In the film, Snape is presented as a glowering figure lurking behind black robes and piercing glares, whose apparent hatred for Harry seems to emerge from nowhere. His disdain is felt but never truly explained, leaving viewers with an ambiguous impression of a man who exists mainly as a red herring in the story's central mystery. However, in the original novel by J.K. Rowling, Snape's antagonism is not just a dark cloud hovering in the background. It is a constant, suffocating presence built through consistent and deliberate cruelty that Harry feels in every potion class, every point unfairly deducted, and every cutting remark made in front of his peers. From the moment Snape first meets Harry in the book, the animosity is clear and biting. Harry's very first potions lesson turns into a public interrogation. While the film merely alludes to this scene with a few snide remarks, the book captures Snape's calculated humiliation of an 11-year-old boy on his first day of a new life. When Harry cannot answer obscure questions about potion ingredients, Snape sneers. Fame isn't everything, mocking Harry for being known as the boy who lived rather than as a student worthy of academic respect. This moment defines Snape's treatment of Harry not just as strict, but as openly hostile. The bitterness in the classroom does not stop there. Snape continues to make Harry's life difficult in subtle but painful ways. He docks Gryffindor points from Harry for minor infractions, or for nothing at all. He belittles him constantly in front of the class, making comments that clearly single Harry out for scorn. One particularly sharp example is when Snape tells the class, "I see no difference between you and your father. strutting about the castle, breaking rules, thinking you're above everyone else. These words never appear in the film, but in the book, they deepen the personal nature of Snape's resentment, connecting Harry to James Potter, whom Snape loathed in their school days. The cumulative effect of Snape's treatment in the book does more than just unsettle Harry. It deeply influences how Harry perceives the mystery surrounding the Philosopher's Stone. Harry doesn't simply suspect Snape because he looks unpleasant or acts strangely. He suspects him because Snape acts with overt hostility and because there's a narrative logic, from Harry's perspective, that ties Snape's behavior directly to malevolent intentions. When Harry's broomstick is cursed during a Quidditch match, his first instinct is to blame Snape because Snape had already made it clear he wished Harry ill. The film presents this conclusion as instinctive, almost whimsical. In the book, it is the result of consistent psychological pressure and a series of troubling interactions. One of the most telling book-exclusive scenes takes place in the staff room, where Harry and Ron overhear Snape arguing with Professor Quirrell. Snape, furious, is pressing Quirrell about the protections placed on the Philosopher's Stone. Harry, listening behind the door, interprets Snape's aggressive questioning as confirmation of his guilt. It is a pivotal moment, feeding directly into Harry's belief that Snape is trying to steal the stone for himself. This scene is omitted entirely from the film, which instead uses visual misdirection and tone to build suspicion rather than character-driven reasoning. The absence of such moments in the film dulls the complexity of Snape's role. Without them, his character risks becoming a caricature, just another dark figure in a castle full of shadows. In the book, however, Snape's antagonism is not just a plot device, but an emotional cornerstone for Harry. It is one of his first real confrontations with adult injustice, with the idea that people in power can be unfair and biased, and that authority does not always mean virtue. The reader, like Harry, begins to see Snape as a genuine threat, not just to Harry's peace of mind, but perhaps to the entire school. This deeper tension builds gradually, feeding into Harry's growing paranoia. When he, Hermione, and Ron discover that someone is trying to steal the stone, their thoughts immediately return to Snape. "Snape's trying to steal it," Harry says with certainty in the book, echoing what he's felt for months. The film shows Harry as suspicious, but his suspicions are never truly justified. They seem to arise from mood and music, not memory and experience. In contrast, the novel crafts an entire case, brick by brick, with Snape's own words and actions forming the walls that trap Harry's belief. Even other characters reinforce this narrative in the book. Hagrid accidentally lets slip that Snape was one of the professors protecting the stone, which only increases Harry's conviction. Why would he try to stop someone from stealing it if he's trying to steal it himself? Harry asks in the book. The irony is rich, and Rowling uses it masterfully to sustain suspense. But none of this detail appears in the film, which moves the plot forward quickly, sacrificing these layers of character motivation for pacing. Snape's treatment of Neville Longbottom also adds weight to his character in the book. Snape humiliates Neville repeatedly, mocking him for his failures and ignoring his efforts. This cruel favoritism reinforces Harry's belief that Snape plays by his own rules, and that his behavior is rooted in contempt, not in a desire to teach. The film brushes past this entirely, focusing instead on Snape's interactions with Harry alone. The broader context of Snape's classroom cruelty, especially to vulnerable students, is left behind, weakening the case for why Harry and his friends are so adamant in their suspicions. Number 18, A Christmas Gift for Hermione. When the frost of winter wrapped the towers of Hogwarts in silence, the corridors emptied as students boarded the Hogwarts Express for the holidays. Most left with excitement in their hearts and trunks full of sweets, but Hermione Granger stayed behind. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, J.K. Rowling chose to reveal the beginnings of true friendship not in grand gestures but in small, quiet acts, like a simple Christmas gift. This moment, subtle in the narrative but powerful in emotion, was stripped away in the film adaptation, robbing the trio's bond of one of its earliest and warmest sparks. In the book, the first signs of true affection between Harry, Ron, and Hermione come not through flashy action sequences, but through acts of kindness. After their shared experience with the mountain troll on Halloween, the walls between them begin to fall. Rowling writes, "There are some things you can't share without ending up liking each other, and knocking out a 12-foot mountain troll is one of them." But what follows in the weeks after is equally crucial. Hermione, once isolated by her over-eagerness and strict adherence to rules, slowly becomes an accepted part of Harry and Ron's world. This process unfolds organically in the pages, aided not by dialogue alone, but by the thoughtful way they begin to consider her feelings. It is during the Christmas holidays that this shift becomes undeniable. Harry and Ron, who also stay behind at Hogwarts, realize that Hermione will be spending the holidays alone, her parents away in another country. Their decision to give her a present is not born out of obligation or convenience, but from a genuine desire to show her she is no longer alone. In the film, this period is condensed into a brief montage of decorations and sweaters, where laughter echoes over wide castle shots. What is lost is the slow knitting together of three lonely souls into a unit built on care. The book captures this delicate emotional movement. Harry and Ron, not known for being especially thoughtful, are shown thinking of Hermione not out of pity, but affection. They pool what little they have and offer her a gift. It's nothing expensive, it doesn't dazzle, but it matters. This is where the storytelling magic of the book shines. Rowling doesn't even dwell on what exactly the gift is. She doesn't need to. The reaction is what matters most. When Hermione receives the present, she is overwhelmed. She quietly admits it's the first time someone outside her family has ever given her a Christmas present. That line is the weight of her character, distilled into one sentence. For all her cleverness, for all her knowledge, Hermione has been alone. She was the girl who cried in the bathroom on Halloween. She was the one who had to pretend she didn't care that no one liked her. But Harry and Ron saw past that. And instead of just tolerating her presence, they chose to make her feel wanted. It's a small moment, but it says more about their friendship than any line of dialogue ever could. In the movie, this emotional resonance is barely touched upon. The scene of Hermione receiving a present is absent. Instead, we are given visuals. Harry unwrapping his invisibility cloak, snow falling outside, a cozy fire in the Gryffindor common room. These are beautiful, yes, but the soul of the scene, the emotional heartbeat, is missing. Without Hermione's gift, without her reaction, without that glimpse into her isolation and the warmth that shatters it, the trio's friendship seems sudden and mechanical. This exclusion is not a mere oversight. It reshapes how the audience perceives their bond. In the film, their friendship is driven by plot. They survive the troll, they go after the Philosopher's Stone, they win the House Cup. But in the book, it's nurtured in silence and softness. When Ron buys her a gift, even something small, it shows a shift in his character. He is not always tactful, not always kind, often too blunt for his own good. But he sees Hermione, he understands that her logic and lectures hide someone who longs for connection, and he tries, in his own way, to show her she belongs. Harry, too, is learning. He has never had anyone to buy a present for, never had the means nor the permission. Giving Hermione a gift is not just about her. It's about Harry discovering that he can give something of himself, that he matters enough to make someone else smile. His life with the Dursleys offered him no such lessons. But at Hogwarts he begins to build emotional bridges. The act of giving, simple as it is, marks one of his first steps into true friendship. Hermione's reaction is described with care. She doesn't leap with joy or cry. She is touched, deeply. Rowling knows how to use restraint, letting a character's quiet acknowledgement speak volumes. Hermione's gratitude isn't performative, it's authentic. She tells them this is her first Christmas present from friends, and in doing so, she allows herself to be vulnerable. That vulnerability is the turning point. From that moment on, the trio isn't just a group of kids solving mysteries. They are something more. They are each other's family. And this idea, found family, is central to the entire Harry Potter series. And it starts here, not with grand magic, but with a small wrapped parcel handed to a lonely girl during Christmas. That the film erases this moment is not simply an omission of a line or a scene. It is an omission of a foundational truth. The trio's bond is not forged solely in danger, but in empathy, in recognizing the wounds they all carry and choosing to respond with kindness. It's easy to imagine the film's logic. A Christmas present doesn't move the plot forward. It's a quiet moment, and yet that is exactly what makes it matter. Without those quiet moments, without the subtle brushstrokes of character development, the story becomes mechanical. We see them working together, but not why. We see them laughing, but not how they learned to trust. We are told they are friends, but rarely shown what made them so. The book shows us. It tells us through action, not declaration. Through Harry reaching into his trunk, Ron awkwardly offering something wrapped in hand-me-down paper, Hermione blinking away emotion she didn't expect to feel. It is through these tiny decisions that Rowling reveals who her characters are. And it is why readers connected so deeply with them, because their friendship felt earned. The absence of this detail in the film diminishes Hermione's arc. It frames her as the convenient smart one, the necessary brain to solve puzzles. But in the book, she is a girl who learns how to belong. She does not start with confidence. Her sharpness is defense, her perfectionism a shield. But when Harry and Ron give her a gift, they pierce that shield. They let her be human, not just helpful. And in return, she lets them into her heart. What could have been a simple moment becomes, in the book, a signal flare of emotional growth. It is a reminder that magic, for all its wonder, is not the greatest force in the wizarding world. Friendship is, empathy is. The courage to reach out, even in the smallest way, is what truly changes lives. And for Hermione, the gift is not just an object. It is proof that she is seen, understood, and accepted. In the end, this moment is one of many that the film adaptation sacrifices in its attempt to streamline the narrative. But what is lost in the cutting room is not just time, it is the very heartbeat of the story. A small gift wrapped with care, placed quietly in the hands of a girl who had never received one before. That is how friendships begin. Not with fanfare, but with thoughtfulness. And that is what J.K. Rowling gave us. Number 19, Hermione wasn't always a friend. For the troll in the girls' bathroom, Hermione Granger was not a friend. She was a nuisance, a know-it-all, an outsider, even among 11-year-olds. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, J.K. Rowling carefully paints her not as the instant member of the Golden Trio we remember from the films, but as a girl so eager to prove herself that she alienates everyone around her. For weeks, Hermione was not very popular and had no friends, a line Rowling does not soften. She corrects everyone, quotes rules and textbooks unprompted, and raises her hand with such annoying precision that Professor Flitwick calls her by name before even finishing the question. From the very first train ride on the Hogwarts Express, Hermione rubs people the wrong way. She barges into the boys' compartment looking for Neville's toad and immediately begins asserting her knowledge. She fixes Harry's glasses with the Alohomora charm, even though it was unsolicited, and points out Ron's faulty spell with an edge of superiority. That moment, as small as it seems, sets the tone. Hermione does not listen. She talks, teaches, and takes up space in a way that makes children recoil. Even Harry, just rescued from a life of obscurity and eager to make friends, finds her difficult. When Ron mocks her behind her back, saying she's a nightmare, honestly, Harry doesn't protest, because in truth, he agrees. That particular quote, She must have noticed because she wasn't at dinner and she wasn't in the common room all evening, marks Hermione's retreat from the group. She's overheard Ron's harsh words and hides in a bathroom to cry. The book does not romanticize this moment. It doesn't turn Hermione into a sympathetic martyr. Instead, it lets her sit in the full loneliness of being unwanted. No one comes looking for her. No one realizes she's missing until the troll arrives. That's the reality of pre-friendship Hermione. A girl brilliant enough to impress her professors, but emotionally shut out by her peers. When the troll is let loose in the castle on Halloween, a chaos erupts, but more than that, this moment becomes the fragile doorway into real friendship. It's Ron and Harry who realize Hermione doesn't know about the troll. They go after her, not because they suddenly care deeply, but because they feel vaguely responsible. The bravery they show in protecting her from the troll is clumsy and real. Harry clinging to the troll's neck, Ron managing the levitation spell just in time. It's not a planned rescue, it's instinctive, dangerous, and awkward, and that's what makes it believable. The aftermath of the troll fight is where the book diverges sharply from the film. In the movie, the trio exchanges a few breaths and instantly becomes inseparable. But the book lingers in that space between strangers and friends. Rowling writes, "There are some things you can't share without ending up liking each other, and knocking out a 12-foot mountain troll is one of them." It's a sentence that suggests transformation. Not instantaneous, but inevitable. The shift in their dynamic does not erase the weeks of irritation, but it makes room for connection. And for Hermione, it's the first time she feels genuinely chosen, not just needed for her intelligence. What the film glosses over is the emotional growth Hermione undergoes after this night. She stops correcting everyone quite so much. She listens more. She's still brilliant and eager, but there's a new humility to her presence, a softness earned by vulnerability. Rowling shows this subtly. Hermione begins laughing with the boys, not at them. She still does their homework on occasion, still quotes the rules, but now it's framed as helpful, not hostile. The troll fight broke down her defenses and theirs. They saw each other terrified and imperfect. They saved one another, literally. That kind of memory lingers. The film version short-circuits this development. In just one sequence, the audience is meant to believe that three very different children, the lonely boy who lived in a cupboard, the youngest son of a poor wizarding family, and the perfectionist, muggle-born, who wants to be the best, become fast friends. The nuance of how hard it is for children to make real friendships is lost. Hermione's pain, her desperation to belong, and the cold shoulder she endures for weeks, none of it is addressed. Instead, the story is simplified into a clean narrative: rescue the girl, become friends, never look back. That reduction matters, because when Hermione stands beside Harry and Ron later in the story, when she breaks rules to help them, when she faces danger without blinking, it means less if we forget how much she had to earn that place. Her loyalty isn't automatic. It's not the product of one night. It grows from rejection, self-awareness, and mutual sacrifice. And when she throws herself into helping Harry discover the truth about the Philosopher's Stone, we feel the depth of that friendship more in the book precisely because we saw how hard it was to form. Consider, for example, Hermione's decision to lie to Professor McGonagall after the troll incident. "I went looking for the troll," she says, covering for the boys even though it was their idea to follow her. It's her first real act of social bravery. Not academic excellence, not spell work, but loyalty. That moment is pivotal. She risks punishment and reputation for the sake of two boys who, only days earlier, wanted nothing to do with her. It's not just about gratitude for saving her, it's about choosing them. And in turn, that choice opens the door for them to choose her too. The contrast with the film's treatment of this event is stark. Emma Watson's Hermione lies about the troll with a clever smirk, and the music swells. The scene plays like a moment of triumph, a neat cap to a heroic chapter. But the book lingers in the emotional awkwardness, the nervous glances, the understanding that this changes everything. It's not a montage of bonding, it's the fragile start of something that might become friendship if they let it. As the book progresses, this foundation deepens. Hermione becomes the moral compass of the trio, not because she was written that way from the start, but because she grows into it. Her willingness to bend the rules comes only after she learns that people matter more than principles. Her courage, as Dumbledore later says, matches that of any Gryffindor. But it's born not of impulse like Ron's or destiny like Harry's, but of thought. She chooses to stand by them again and again, even when it costs her. This evolution is only meaningful because the early chapters show her as deeply flawed. Without that, Hermione risks becoming a caricature, the brilliant girl who always saves the day. But Rowling's Hermione is layered. She's lonely, proud, defensive, and brilliant. She can be annoying, and she can be brave. The film presents her as a friend from the start, which erases the emotional work she does to become one. It also diminishes the boy's growth, particularly Ron's, because learning to accept Hermione is a major part of Ron's arc. He moves from mocking her to relying on her, and that transformation is part of what matures him. Even Harry's understanding of friendship is altered by Hermione's presence. With Ron, he finds laughter and shared wonder. With Hermione, he discovers the value of challenge, of being held to a higher standard. She pushes him, questions him, and never lets him coast. But none of this could happen if she were just another easy companion from the beginning. The friction matters. The initial discomfort gives way to trust, and that more than anything is the heart of their trio. The truth is, children rarely become friends overnight. Real friendship takes time, misunderstandings, forgiveness, and shared moments of fear and grace. The troll incident in the book doesn't resolve all their differences. It simply gives them permission to begin. And in letting Hermione be unpopular, annoying, and hurt before she is loved, Rowling honors the full journey of becoming a friend. The film, in its need for simplicity, skips those messy but beautiful steps. And that's why book Hermione, the one who sits alone in the bathroom, the one who hesitates before joining their laughter, the one who learns to be needed for more than her knowledge, feels so real. Because she wasn't instantly accepted. She had to walk through fire, or at least past a 12-foot troll, to find her place. And that place, once earned, never falters. Number 20, the House Cup Competition. In the pages of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the House Cup is not a mere afterthought or a background detail. It is a vital, breathing part of the student's daily existence. From the moment Harry sets foot in Hogwarts, he is introduced not only to a world of spells and enchantments, but to an equally potent, fierce competition among the four houses. Gryffindor, Slytherin, Ravenclaw, and Hufflepuff are more than living arrangements. They are clans, families, legacies. Every point earned or lost carries emotional weight. Every success or misstep echoes through the corridors, triggering cheers or groans. This constant pressure and pride tied to house points imbues the school year with suspense and meaning. In contrast, the film version treats the House Cup with brevity, almost as an ornamental feature, glossed over in favor of visual spectacle. The essence, the true emotional stakes that drive student behavior and inter-house rivalry, are largely stripped away. In the book, the hourglasses filled with gemstones, emeralds for Slytherin, rubies for Gryffindor, sapphires for Ravenclaw, and yellow diamonds for Hufflepuff, are mentioned repeatedly. Students walk by them in the entrance hall, casting longing or bitter glances. These are not just decorative features, they are scoreboards that define the social hierarchy within the castle. When Professor McGonagall awards or deducts points, it is a communal affair. The entire house rejoices or sulks. In the film, the hourglasses appear briefly, nearly hidden from the viewer, and no student ever mentions them aloud or reacts to a sudden drop in score. The absence of this emotional undercurrent undermines a fundamental part of the school's culture, as written in the book. Slytherin's dominance over the House Cup is a matter of historical pride within the school. It is made clear that for the past 7 years they have held the trophy, a streak that reinforces their aura of elitism and control. Draco Malfoy boasts of it. Marcus Flint plays with that legacy on his shoulders. The green and silver banners hanging each June are not just decorations but triumphs. This narrative is entirely absent from the film, which never establishes Slytherin's legacy of victory. Thus, when Gryffindor finally wins at the end, the emotional impact is blunted. There is no sense of breaking a long-standing tradition, of overcoming a history of defeat. The viewers are given no context to truly celebrate. The book also explores the impact of losing points on an individual level. When Harry, Hermione, and Neville are caught out of bed and lose 50 points each for Gryffindor, the backlash is devastating. The entire house turns against them. Fred and George, usually jokesters, refuse to speak to Harry. Students glare at Hermione in the library. Neville becomes a pariah. This collective shame isolates them, and it is one of Harry's lowest moments in the book. He is not disliked for breaking a rule. Hogwarts students adore troublemakers, but for costing his house dearly. That subtle distinction adds emotional depth. The film cuts this storyline entirely. There is no fallout, no reckoning. It reduces what should have been a crucial character moment to a forgotten scene. When Hermione earns back points for Gryffindor by solving Snape's logic puzzle during the quest for the stone, it is a moment of quiet redemption. In the book, her 10 points are not just a number, they symbolize recognition for her intellect, bravery, and loyalty. In the film, the puzzle scene is gone entirely. Her moment to shine, to be acknowledged by her headmaster and her peers, disappears. The House Cup in the book is not just about heroics. It rewards subtle courage, logic, and sacrifice. The removal of such details in the film strips the cup of its richness. Ron, too, has his moment of glory tied directly to the House Cup. His chess match sacrifice, one of the most selfless and strategic moves in the entire series, earns him 50 points. Dumbledore's words, "To Mr. Ronald Weasley, for the best played game of chess Hogwarts has seen in many years, I award 50 points." Are powerful not only because of the number, but because of the validation. Ron, so often overshadowed by his brothers and Harry, is acknowledged in front of the whole school. The applause that follows is thunderous. In the film, while the chess scene is included, the link between Ron's victory and the cup is minimized. He lies unconscious in the hospital wing, while Dumbledore speaks, and the significance of his contribution is glossed over. Neville's role in the House Cup finale is perhaps the most emotionally resonant moment in the entire book. He receives 10 points for standing up to his friends. Dumbledore says it takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends. That moment is not only a twist, it is a moral revelation. It redefines courage and underscores one of the book's central messages, that quiet integrity is as heroic as facing dark lords. The film includes the line, but it lacks the same gravity. Neville's award feels like a footnote, a brief nod rather than a celebration. The swelling of Gryffindor pride, the eruption of cheers, the emotional catharsis, none of it fully lands. Throughout the book, students strategize and monitor their house's standing. Lee Jordan, the Quidditch commentator, peppers his match narration with jabs about house points. Teachers wield point deduction as both punishment and performance review. When Snape unfairly favors Slytherin, students grumble, and Gryffindors learn to hold back sarcasm just to avoid losing more. These interactions flesh out a system that is deeply embedded in student life. The film, meanwhile, rarely shows classes or professors awarding or deducting points. Viewers are never made to feel the pressure of daily behavior being weighed and measured. Even the teachers are not immune to the competition. In the book, McGonagall beams with pride when Gryffindor wins the cup. Sprout supports her Hufflepuffs with gentle guidance. Snape's scowl when Slytherin is defeated is legendary. The House Cup affects adult behavior, teacher dynamics, and classroom culture. It is a pervasive influence. The film presents the final cup ceremony more as a surprise twist than the culmination of an entire year's emotional build-up. The change of banners from green to red is visual but hollow without context. One of the most egregious omissions in the film is the silence surrounding Slytherin's fall. In the book, their loss is a public humiliation. The green banners vanish, replaced by scarlet and gold. Students gasp. Slytherins are left stunned. Dumbledore uses the moment to teach a lesson in valor and moral character. In the film, the dramatic weight is lost. The moment is treated more as comic relief than symbolic justice. There's no understanding that Gryffindor's win was not just a numerical triumph, but a moral one. The concept of delayed gratification also adds to the book's power. Throughout the year, Gryffindor is behind. Their scores fluctuate with every success and setback. The students watch the hourglasses with bated breath. When they finally see their gemstones rise above Slytherin's in the final moments, it is not just a surprise, it is an earned reward. Dumbledore doesn't simply change the score, he tells a story through it. He acknowledges sacrifice, intellect, strategy, and moral strength. The ceremony is a narrative arc in itself. The film turns it into a punchline. Harry's journey, too, is coloured by the cup. He begins the year as a boy who knows nothing about houses, points, or Hogwarts customs. But by the end, he has grown to care deeply about Gryffindor's standing. When he loses points after being caught out of bed, he is crushed. He vows to make up for it. His victories, catching the snitch facing Quirrell, standing up for what's right, are as much for his house as for himself. This emotional development is central to his integration into the wizarding world. The film simplifies this journey into action beats and plot twists, missing the emotional layers. Even the school's social structure is shaped by the House Cup. Students form friendships and rivalries based on it. Harry's animosity with Draco is not just personal, it is institutional. They represent two competing ideologies. Gryffindor's win at the end is not only a win over Slytherin, it's a stand against arrogance, entitlement, and cruelty. The book frames it that way, the film does not. Without the backstory of repeated Slytherin victories and Gryffindor's struggle to earn back dignity, the win lacks emotional depth. The House Cup narrative in the book mirrors the central theme of Philosopher's Stone, that true greatness lies in choices, not in birth or bravado. Gryffindor's win is not simply about heroism in the final hour, but about quiet, everyday acts of courage, self-control, and integrity. When Dumbledore adds up the points, he is rewarding more than actions. He is rewarding character. It is this emotional truth that the film sacrifices for brevity, and in doing so it dims one of the most poignant lights of the first year at Hogwarts. Number 21, First Meeting with Quirrell. In the film adaptation of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the first time we meet Professor Quirrell, he is a nervous, stammering man with a large purple turban wrapped awkwardly around his head. The setting is the Hogwarts Great Hall during the start-of-term feast, and Quirrell is introduced along with the other professors at the staff table. The movie does little to build a sense of mystery around him in this moment. He is played almost for comic relief, frightened by his own shadow, visibly uncomfortable, and completely overshadowed by figures like Snape and Dumbledore. The turban is odd, but no more than an eccentric fashion choice. His stutter draws some glances, but nothing in this scene hints at the dark, parasitic truth hidden beneath that cloth. For most viewers, he is an unremarkable side character, a red herring at best. In contrast, the book paints a far more subtle and chilling picture. The first appearance of Quirinus Quirrell does not happen within the safe walls of Hogwarts, but much earlier and in a far more intimate setting. As Harry steps into the magical world for the very first time, escorted by the ever-reliable Hagrid, his path crosses unknowingly with the man who harbours the Dark Lord. The location is the Leaky Cauldron, an innocuous, cosy pub tucked between the mundane and the magical, a gateway to Diagon Alley. It is in this transitional space where Harry is still learning the rules of his new world that he first meets the man who will try to kill him before the school year is out. The book offers a quiet, almost forgettable moment, one that gains weight only upon rereading. Hagrid is introducing Harry to the patrons of the Leaky Cauldron, many of whom are stunned to see the boy who lived standing in the flesh. Among the crowd of witches and wizards is Professor Quirrell. Rowling describes him as a young man who has had a terrible time with vampires and is now teaching defense against the dark arts. He shakes Harry's hand. There is no stutter, no turban, no sense of doom. The line reads, "Professor Quirrell, who'd been looking very nervous, gave Harry a smile that was just a little too wide and shook his hand." That handshake, innocent and unremarkable at the time, becomes deeply unsettling in retrospect. Because later, we learn that Voldemort is attached to Quirrell's body. We learn that Harry cannot touch him without causing him pain because of the protective magic left by Lily Potter's sacrifice. But in that Leaky Cauldron scene, the handshake happens without incident, which leads to an intriguing, terrifying implication. At that point in time, Voldemort may not yet be sharing Quirrell's body. This transforms the scene into a sinister turning point. We, the readers, realize that Harry had a chance meeting with someone who would soon be possessed by his greatest enemy. The villain was already watching, already moving, already infecting those closest to the boy. This early encounter is entirely omitted from the film. There is no Leaky Cauldron scene with Quirrell. The audience is denied that creeping sense of dread, the kind that arises from watching a predator and his prey unknowingly cross paths. The omission simplifies Quirrell's arc, turning him into a two-dimensional servant rather than a tragic figure seduced by power. By removing the handshake, the film also removes a key layer of complexity, the slow corruption of Quirrell. In the book, we get a sense that Quirrell was once a real person, ambitious, perhaps weak, but not evil. We meet him as himself. The film introduces him only after Voldemort has already begun to twist him from within. This moment in the book also emphasizes the contrast between Harry's innocence and the darkness that surrounds him. He is stepping into a world he doesn't understand, and yet danger is already reaching out its hand. The juxtaposition is powerful. Harry, wide-eyed and curious, is surrounded by friendly faces and warm welcomes. He doesn't see the shadow that is already creeping into his life. Rowling masterfully sets this up as part of the larger theme. Evil often enters quietly, unnoticed, under the guise of friendliness or normalcy. Interestingly, this small scene gives Quirrell more humanity than he ever receives in the film. In the Leaky Cauldron, he is still a professor, a flawed but functioning member of the magical world. He has a reputation, he's been on adventures, he is spoken of with a sort of nervous admiration. When Hagrid tells Harry about him, he says, "Poor bloke. Brilliant mind. He was fine while he was studying out of books, but then he took a year off to get some first-hand experience. They say he met vampires in the Black Forest, and there was a nasty bit of trouble with a hag. Never been the same since." This tells us that Quirrell tried. He wanted to be more than just a theorist. He stepped into the dark willingly, and it cost him everything. The film, by skipping this nuance, deprives the audience of Quirrell's tragic dimension. Instead, he becomes a puppet, a cliché of the cowardly villain. But in the book, we get hints of a man who lost his soul in the pursuit of greatness. Voldemort didn't just choose him at random. He found a mind that was already cracking, a will that was already bending. The Leaky Cauldron meeting is important because it shows us that moment before the fall when Quirrell could still smile, still shake hands, still function as himself. It gives weight to what he later becomes. Moreover, this first contact between Harry and Quirrell is rich with narrative irony. The reader knows, in retrospect, that this was not just a friendly introduction, it was a foreshadowing, a warning, but Harry has no idea. To him, it's just another stranger. This is a powerful storytelling device, letting the reader see what the character cannot. The tension lies in the knowledge that something is wrong, even if we cannot yet name it. Rowling's decision to include this scene early in the book adds layers of meaning that only reveal themselves on a second reading. In the film, Voldemort's presence is mostly theatrical, a face on the back of Quirrell's head, hidden behind a turban, revealed in a dramatic climax. It works for the visual medium, but it lacks the subtlety of the written word. The book plants seeds early. It lets us feel the growing unease, the sense that something isn't quite right. By the time Quirrell removes his turban in the final confrontation, the shock is not just visual, it's emotional. We've watched his descent, we remember his wide smile in the pub. We realize how far he's fallen. It is also significant that in the book, Quirrell doesn't start stammering until later. At the Leaky Cauldron, he is just slightly nervous. The stutter, like the turban, appears after his troubles abroad. This raises the question, was it real or part of a mask? Was he always so timid, or did Voldemort make him that way? The physical symptoms of fear become a cloak for true evil. This duality is far more complex than the simple caricature shown in the film. The Leaky Cauldron scene also serves as a metaphorical handshake between Harry and his destiny. He touches a man who will later try to kill him. He walks away unharmed, unaware, untouched for now. It's a quiet collision between past and future. Voldemort is still weak, still hiding, but he is already circling. This is storytelling at its finest, layered, meaningful, and filled with ominous silence. Perhaps the most haunting part of that early meeting is how ordinary it seems. There are no dramatic flashes, no ominous music, no lingering camera angles. Just a boy, a professor, a handshake, and yet that ordinary moment contains within it the seed of a terrible truth. Evil doesn't always come screaming. Sometimes it enters the room with a smile, sometimes it shakes your hand. Quirrell's presence in the Leaky Cauldron foreshadows how Voldemort will operate for the rest of the series. He does not burst in like a monster. He works through others. He finds the weak, the lost, the ambitious. He whispers, he manipulates, he hides behind masks. Quirrell is the first of many to fall under his shadow. The book gives us that first glimpse, the film does not. This small divergence between book and movie may seem trivial to some, but it highlights a key difference in how the two mediums handle mystery and suspense. The film chooses spectacle, the book chooses subtlety. And in that quiet moment in the Leaky Cauldron, Rowling reminds us that the darkest stories often begin in the most innocent places. Number 22. Harry's search for his parents. Harry Potter had spent 10 years in the cupboard under the stairs before he ever heard the truth about his parents. That silence, that aching void of knowing nothing beyond the vague lie of a car crash, defined the early chapters of his story. In J.K. Rowling's book Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, this hunger for knowledge about James and Lily Potter pulses beneath the surface of every chapter, growing stronger as the story unfolds. The boy who lived was also the boy who mourned, and the boy who wondered. In the film adaptation, however, this grief is subdued, eclipsed by plot and spectacle. Though Harry appears occasionally sad, the film rarely gives space to explore the loneliness that drives him to search the past. Where the book is introspective, the film is kinetic. And in this shift, the emotional depth of Harry's loss becomes an echo instead of a foundation. One of the earliest moments in the book where this contrast becomes apparent is during Harry's first real conversation with Hagrid. When Hagrid arrives at the hut on the rock, he does far more than deliver a letter. He brings truth. In the film, this moment is brief, almost rushed, as if merely functional to push the narrative forward. But in the book, Harry clings to Hagrid's every word, hungry for any scrap of information. He asks how his parents died. He learns about Voldemort. He hears, for the first time, that his parents were murdered, not killed, in an accident. This is not mere curiosity. This is the unraveling of a lifetime of lies. Rowling allows Harry the emotional space to process what he hears. His grief is not noisy or theatrical. It is quiet, stunned, and sincere. The movie trims this to a few somber expressions, never pausing long enough for the weight to settle. Later, at Hogwarts, Harry's interest in his parents does not fade. It sharpens. In the book, he listens intently whenever their names are mentioned. He asks questions when he can, but more often he observes in silence. When Hagrid gives him the photo album filled with pictures of James and Lily, it is not simply a gift, it is a treasure chest of memory. The scene in the film is touching, yes, but it is over in moments. The book, however, lingers. Harry stared hungrily at the photograph, Rowling writes. He had never seen his parents looking back at him before. The word hungrily reveals everything. This is not a passing interest. This is a boy desperate to build an identity from ashes and whispers. The Mirror of Erised sequence offers perhaps the most striking divergence between the two mediums. In the book, Harry returns to the mirror night after night, unable to tear himself away from the phantom presence of his parents. The mirror shows him what he wants most in the world, his family. Not glory, not wealth, not even safety. Just the faces of those he never had the chance to know. Rowling describes him sitting before the mirror for hours, staring hungrily back at the smiling faces of his parents. Again, hunger. Again, absence. In the film, the scene is reduced. Harry sees them once, and the moment passes. There is no repetition, no obsession. The emotional intensity is flattened into symbolism. The mirror is mystical, yes, but it loses the quiet horror of showing a child the thing he can never truly have. Throughout the book, Harry's grief is quiet but omnipresent. He doesn't speak of it often, but it lingers in his choices. He is drawn to those who knew his parents, McGonagall, Hagrid, Dumbledore. Each of them, in their own way, offers him a sliver of the past. Even Snape, for all his bitterness, is part of the puzzle. In the book, when Harry learns that Snape may have hated James, his reaction is conflicted, not merely angry. He wants to know who his father really was, not just through the lens of heroism, but in truth. The film doesn't allow this complexity to unfold. Snape is simply a villain. The emotional intricacy is replaced by dramatic confrontation. Harry's desire to understand his parents is not only about grief, it is about identity. In the book, Rowling carefully constructs Harry's longing as something that shapes his sense of self. When he hears that he has his mother's eyes, he treasures it. When he is told that he is brave like his father, he stores that too. These comments are not clichés, they are clues. They help him imagine who he might have been, had they lived. They help him build a connection to a life he never got to live. In the film, such moments exist, but they are fleeting. They do not shape Harry's inner world in the same deliberate way. Another poignant moment in the book comes when Harry asks Professor McGonagall about his father. It's a short exchange, but telling. McGonagall replies with more warmth than usual. She remembers James as talented and brave. Harry listens, quiet and attentive, storing the memory. He does not ask boldly, but with the quiet reverence of someone afraid to disturb the past. This scene never appears in the film. Its absence may seem small, but it is part of a broader pattern, a gradual erasure of Harry's emotional quest for family. Even during action-driven scenes, the book weaves in Harry's loneliness. When he sees Neville receiving a remembrall from his grandmother, there is a momentary sting. Harry has no grandmother to send him packages. When Christmas arrives, the Weasleys send him a sweater. It is a moment of joy, but also a reminder. Harry receives presents not from blood, but from kindness. His parents would have sent him gifts, would have wrapped them in laughter. He doesn't say it aloud, but Rowling lets us feel the absence. At the end of the book, when Harry faces Voldemort, the memory of his mother becomes more than a thought. It becomes a shield. The love Lily Potter gave her son protects him, literally. but it is also emotional armor. Harry survives not only because of magic, but because of the love he never got to fully know. The film portrays the magical protection as a plot device. The book, however, makes it a quiet triumph of emotional inheritance. Love is not only the answer, it is the wound and the cure. Even small details reveal Harry's yearning. He keeps the photo album close. He rereads the notes that come with his gifts. He listens when others mention his parents. He doesn't cry often, but the sadness is there, in the way he walks alone, in the way he watches families reunite at King's Cross. The film touches on these moments, but it doesn't dwell, and without dwelling, the weight disappears. The emotional structure of Rowling's story depends on Harry's solitude. Yes, he finds friends. Yes, he finds purpose. But at the heart of his journey is a boy sitting by himself in a quiet dormitory, staring at a photo of two people he'll never speak to. In the book, this image recurs again and again. In the film, it is fleeting. The cinematic format demands movement. Emotion must give way to action. But the heart of Philosopher's Stone is not in the spells. It is in the silences. It is in the questions Harry cannot ask, because there is no one left to answer. Harry's experience with family at Hogwarts is shaped by the ghosts of what he has lost. The Weasleys are generous, but they are not his. Dumbledore is kind but distant. Every connection Harry makes is coloured by the absence of James and Lily. In the book, this tension is persistent. In the film, it is glossed over. When Harry says, "I'm not going home," not really, it is one of the few moments the movie captures his longing. But the line passes quickly. It needs the weight of everything that came before. In the book, that weight is always there. In a scene from the book, when Harry is alone in the Gryffindor common room, he stares out the window thinking of his parents. He doesn't speak. He just remembers. He thinks of the mirror, the photographs, the stories Hagrid told him. This is a child piecing together a mythology, trying to create a past from ruins. The film doesn't offer this kind of space. It needs dialogue, it needs events, and in doing so it loses the quiet ache that defines Harry's character. The magic of Philosopher's Stone lies not only in moving staircases and flying brooms, but in the fragile emotional core of a boy looking for a family he barely remembers. Rowling never lets us forget that. Every chapter contains echoes of James and Lily. Every kindness offered to Harry is shadowed by those who can no longer offer it. The film brings the story to life with dazzling visuals, but it simplifies the soul of the tale. Where the book is haunted, the film is entertained, and that is the truest difference of all. Number 23, Secret Conversations Between Teachers. In the dim corridors of Hogwarts, long after curfew, the whisper of secrets filled the air. Hidden behind tapestries and suits of armor, Harry Potter and his friends often found themselves at the edge of forbidden knowledge, not by design, but by accident and curiosity. In the book Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, these secretive, often overheard conversations become crucial in building a layered mystery. The children stumble into a tangled web of adult intentions, half-truths, and concealed dangers. They do not receive straightforward exposition or convenient summaries. Instead, they piece the puzzle together themselves, fragment by fragment. But in the film adaptation, much of this is lost. Conversations are shortened or omitted altogether. The intricate mystery that the trio unravels becomes a trail of obvious clues rather than a detective's case cracked by instinct and courage. One of the earliest and most revealing moments in the book comes when Harry inadvertently eavesdrops on Severus Snape and Professor Quirrell deep in the Forbidden Forest. The passage is written with suspense, tension rising as Harry hears Snape's cold voice pressuring Quirrell. "You don't want me as your enemy, Quirrell," said Snape. This line plants the seed of doubt in both Harry and the reader. It hints at a sinister alliance, or worse, coercion. Harry doesn't understand the full weight of what he hears, but he senses danger. That is the brilliance of the scene. It doesn't offer answers, but raises stakes. the film removes this entirely. We see Snape's harsh exterior, but not this tense, almost criminal confrontation. Without it, Snape's role in the unfolding mystery becomes flatter, and Quirrell's inner turmoil is barely hinted at. The children in the book must wrestle with uncertainty, while the film delivers simple suspicions. Even more subtle is the moment when the trio overhears Hagrid spilling secrets to strangers at the Hog's Head. In the book, Hagrid, always well-meaning but terribly loose-tongued, lets slip crucial information about Fluffy the three-headed dog. I told the stranger I did about Fluffy. I shouldn't have told him that, but he seemed so interested, knew all about dragons, he did. This confession reveals that the trapdoor on the third floor isn't secure. It's a brilliant narrative mechanism, old-style. Gentle character like Hagrid becomes an unintentional leak in Dumbledore's defences. The children overhear this, and it becomes a turning point in their private investigation. In the film, this sequence is dramatically compressed. Hagrid mentions Fluffy, yes, but the significance is blunted. The mystery doesn't deepen, it merely progresses, as if the story is unfolding on a track, not through the children's initiative. Then there's the conversation between Professor McGonagall and Professor Snape regarding Harry's participation in Quidditch. In the book, Harry hears McGonagall nervously discussing Harry's safety. She is not as composed as usual. Her concern is both maternal and mysterious, and it raises new questions. Why is she so worried about a school sport? Why is she speaking to Snape, whom Harry already suspects? These whispered adult anxieties feed the children's curiosity. Everything around them seems charged with subtext, but in the movie, this nuance is trimmed down to a few lines and visual cues. The viewer sees that Harry gets on the Quidditch team and that Snape watches him, but the undercurrent of fear, the concern over his safety, and McGonagall's quiet desperation are lost. The book thrives on atmosphere, on shadows and snippets of dialogue, on silences that mean more than words. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione overhear professors speaking in hushed tones or stumble upon half-covered truths, it gives the story a sense of living intrigue. They are children in a world of adults, but they are not passive. They are detectives, decoding the behavior of their elders. They are the ones uncovering the plot surrounding the Philosopher's Stone, not because someone tells them, but because they listen, observe, and risk. In contrast, the film shifts the emphasis. The adults appear more like expository machines, giving the viewer just enough to stay oriented but never letting us feel the thrill of discovery. Another pivotal moment in the book involves the trio overhearing Snape talking about guarding the stone. Harry interprets this as confirmation of Snape's villainy. The layers of misunderstanding are rich here. Rowling crafts a narrative in which the reader shares Harry's flawed perspective, only to be corrected later. This is masterful misdirection, but in the film these misunderstandings don't quite unfold with the same delicacy. We are told more or less directly that Snape is a threat. There is little room for the viewer to question or wonder. The storytelling becomes flatter. The mystery, which in the book is a maze of misinterpretation, becomes a straight hallway. In another scene from the book, the children witness a heated exchange between Dumbledore and Snape about security measures. This moment adds to the growing tension that something terrible is being anticipated. Dumbledore's calm veneer cracks just slightly, and it is enough to unnerve the children. It's a moment that tells without telling. But again, the film either omits or condenses this. Dumbledore is presented as a stable, knowing presence, and the sense that he is worried, really worried, is diluted. That sense of fragility in the world around the children, the feeling that even the adults are out of their depth, is never fully communicated. Another powerful moment lost in the film is when the trio hears Quirrell weeping alone. In the book, his voice is trembling, his mind breaking. No, not again, please," he murmurs. It's haunting. The children are terrified not because they know what's happening, but because they don't. Quirrell seems less like a villain and more like a victim. This blurs the moral lines in an important way. The mystery becomes not just about what is happening, but why. The film, however, paints Quirrell with broader strokes. He's timid, then suddenly a servant of evil. The psychological descent is skipped, and with it, the eerie, creeping dread that permeates the book. The role of overheard conversations in the book cannot be overstated. They are the breadcrumbs in the forest. Harry, Ron and Hermione follow them with increasing urgency, building their theory of the stone's danger. They don't have all the answers until the very end. This gives the narrative a pulse. The children's agency matters, but in the film they are often guided by events rather than guiding them. It's not just a difference in format, it's a difference in storytelling philosophy. The book trusts its readers to think, to infer, to be uncertain. The film, perhaps wary of confusion, simplifies. Even the timing of certain revelations differs dramatically. In the book, Hagrid's slip about Nicholas Flamel happens organically. He lets the name drop during a conversation, and the children pursue it with weeks of research. It's not an instant clue, but a challenge. They search library shelves, argue over interpretations, get discouraged, and finally succeed. This builds a sense of achievement. The mystery lives in their hands. But in the film, Hermione just finds the answer in a book, by chance. It's a small change, but symbolic. The film prefers clean arcs. The book embraces messy effort. Later, when Harry believes that Snape will steal the stone during the Quidditch match, it's not because someone tells him. It's because of the overheard conversations, the subtle behavior, and the strange coincidences that accumulate. He connects dots that might not even be there. He could be wrong, and often is. But that process of suspicion, investigation, and re-evaluation is central to the narrative. It's what gives the story its richness. The film sacrifices this complexity for clarity. The result is a smoother ride, but less memorable. Even the final twist that Quirrell, not Snape, was the true antagonist hits differently because of how much the book has invested in misdirection. All those overheard moments, all that incomplete information have shaped a false image. The reveal is stunning not because of a plot trick, but because the reader has been led, like Harry, down the wrong path through human error and youthful bias. The film still delivers the twist, but without the same emotional and narrative build-up. It is a surprise, yes, but not a revelation. Through all of this, the book's use of whispered conversations and secretive adult behavior does more than advance the plot. It captures what it feels like to be a child in a world you don't fully understand. The sense that grown-ups know more than they say, that behind every smile is a withheld truth, and that every answer spawns more questions. That feeling is universal. It's how many children see the world. Rowling channels that perfectly. The film, in its need to compress and clarify, loses that quiet magic. The trio's growth throughout the book is directly tied to what they learn from these secret conversations. They gain confidence, not because someone hands them knowledge, but because they uncover it themselves. The school becomes a labyrinth, not just of staircases and spells, but of motives, deceptions, and half-overheard truths. The thrill of turning a corner and hearing a name, a threat, or a plea is irreplaceable. It builds atmosphere, it builds character. Ultimately, the difference lies in trust. The book trusts young readers to navigate shadows, to sit with partial truths, and to guess wrongly. It values the journey over the answer. The film, while visually enchanting, takes away many of those shadows. It lights every corner, names every name, and fills in every blank. But in doing so, it loses that quiet sense of triumph, the feeling that Harry, Ron, and Hermione solved it on their own, not because they were told, but because they listened. Number 24, Ron the chess master. In the dark, echoing chamber filled with life-sized chess pieces, Ron Weasley was no longer just a comic relief or a loyal sidekick. In the book Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, he stepped into a role that transformed him. He became a leader, a strategist, and, most of all, the one who willingly carried the weight of a dangerous decision. The film adaptation, while visually striking, trimmed this moment to its surface. Viewers saw Ron quickly take charge, say a few lines, make a sacrifice, and that was it. But in the book, that scene unfolded like a slow-burning triumph, a rare spotlight on Ron's intellect, courage, and ability to act under pressure when it mattered most. J.K. Rowling didn't rush through the chessboard in her pages. Instead, she allowed readers to sit with Ron's choices, observe his hesitation, and then witness his transformation into someone completely in control. Ron wasn't simply reacting to the challenge, he was mastering it. The enchanted chess game was not just about moving pieces, it was about understanding the enemy, predicting movements, and commanding an army that could just as easily crush him. He didn't merely participate in the game, he played it with the kind of insight that only someone who had lived and breathed chess could achieve. This wasn't about brute force, this was strategy, and Ron was the general. When the trio encountered the massive chessboard as one of the protections for the Philosopher's Stone, it wasn't immediately clear how deadly the game would be. It was Ron who understood. He recognized the pieces, he studied their arrangement, and most importantly, he knew what needed to be done. While Harry and Hermione stood by uncertainly, it was Ron who stepped forward with the cool calculation of someone stepping into his element. He assessed the layout and chose his side with precision. "White always plays first," he noted, a quiet nod to his grasp of the rules that would govern this dangerous match. Throughout the game, Ron didn't ask for input from Harry or Hermione. Not out of arrogance, but because he knew this battlefield was his. He saw the pieces not as stone carvings, but as players with potential. He guided them not just with confidence, but with purpose. Every move he made was deliberate. Rowling wrote, Ron, however, had not been watching. He was carefully examining the board. This small line, often lost in the whirlwind of surrounding action, tells a greater story. Ron's mind was fully engaged. He wasn't acting impulsively, he was strategizing, he was leading. As the game grew more violent, with pieces smashing others to rubble, the tension thickened. Harry and Hermione could only watch, aware that one mistake could mean the end, not just of the game, but of their lives. Ron's voice, often the loudest in laughter or frustration, became steady and measured. He called out moves with authority, guiding his knights and bishops into combat. The weight of responsibility was immense, but he carried it without complaint. "This is the only way," he said, his eyes locked on the board, calculating a path forward that only he could see. The most striking difference from the film lies in the emotional depth of Ron's decision to sacrifice himself. On screen, his moment is quick, even noble, but stripped of the layered intensity that defined it in the novel. In the book, Ron first exhausts every option, twisting the board's possibilities in his mind. Then, with quiet resolve, he places himself in harm's way, not out of recklessness, but as the logical solution to the game's final challenge. "Do you want to stop Snape or not?" he asked Harry, moments before allowing the Black Queen to strike him. His sacrifice wasn't an impulsive act of bravery, it was a necessary play, a checkmate in motion. This decision hits harder when you understand Ron's internal world. He is the sixth child in a large family, constantly overshadowed by older brothers who excel in academics, sports, and rule-breaking. At Hogwarts, he is best friends with the boy who lived and the smartest witch of their age. But here, for the first time, he wasn't in anyone's shadow. The chessboard didn't care about fame or grades. It respected knowledge, courage, and tactical skill, and Ron had all three. In this isolated pocket of danger, he finally stepped out as his own person, not as someone's friend or someone's brother, but as a hero in his own right. Rowling gave Ron the space to be brilliant. His thoughts were clear, his actions meaningful. The prose slows just enough for readers to absorb the weight of his leadership. There's no flair or exaggeration, just a boy doing what needs to be done. That's chess, he explained earlier in the game, and in those words is a truth about Ron's character that the movie never fully explored. He understands games, not just their rules, but their spirit. And he applies this understanding with the kind of self-sacrificing wisdom that only the bravest possess. The sacrifice itself is a climax of tension and emotion. Ron, knowing full well that the Queen's blow could kill him, doesn't hesitate. He mounts the knight, commands the move, and is struck down. The book captures the moment with jarring clarity. The White Queen smashed her fist down on Ron's head. He slumped and fell to the floor. Not dead, Harry was sure, but not playing either. It's haunting, unforgettable. Harry's panic, Hermione's gasp, none of it diminishes what Ron just accomplished. He didn't faint or stumble into this role. He rode into it like a warrior. The significance of this moment is especially poignant because Ron has always wrestled with feelings of inadequacy. He's the underdog, the overlooked one. Yet when it mattered most, when the mission teetered on the edge of failure, it was Ron who seized control. He didn't just survive the challenge, he mastered it. This transformation is vital for understanding Ron's arc throughout the series. It laid the groundwork for the loyalty, courage, and decision-making he would continue to show. The movie skipped the process and showed the result. The book showed the journey, and the journey was the point. Even Hermione, who is rarely at a loss for words, stood in awe of Ron's performance. She didn't interrupt or correct, she trusted him. That trust wasn't blind, it was earned over the course of a tense, brutal game. Ron earned the respect of the chess pieces, the victory over the board, and the admiration of his friends. That kind of validation is rare in the wizarding world, where so much comes down to birthright and legacy. Ron carved out his place with intellect and bravery. No wand, no spell, just sheer strategic brilliance. This wasn't just another obstacle on the way to the Philosopher's Stone. It was the moment when the trio's dynamics solidified. Harry might be the heart, Hermione the mind, but Ron was the spine. He held them upright, supported them through the risk, and when it came time to fall, he did it without hesitation. That's not a sidekick, that's a hero. And in the book, he was allowed to be one. The adaptation, however, stripped that complexity for time, reducing a full campaign of wit and courage to a single, sacrificial move. Ron's victory on the chessboard was deeply symbolic. The youngest Weasley in Hogwarts won not with a wand or brute strength, but with his mind. It was a testament to the value of underestimated intelligence. He was the one who had played chess with Harry on lazy evenings in the common room, the one who had absorbed patterns, studied tactics, and understood risk. When danger became real, that knowledge didn't fail him. It elevated him. Years later, fans remember the moment with affection, but those who've only seen the film often don't understand its depth. They remember Ron knocked out cold, yes, but not the careful thought that led there, not the patience, the skill, the calm authority. They don't hear the internal clockwork ticking behind every move. They don't feel the weight he carried so his friends wouldn't have to. That's what the book gave us, a full picture of who Ron Weasley could be when the world wasn't rushing past him. Ultimately, Ron's role in the chess game was more than a heroic pause in the action. It was a defining chapter in his story, one that gave him agency and proved he wasn't just along for the ride. He was thinking, planning, sacrificing. The book allowed us to see that, to feel every beat of his strategy, every crack of the chessboard beneath his courage. In that game, Ron didn't just shine, he won. And he did it with the grace of someone who knew that sometimes the only way to protect your friends is to take the blow yourself. Number 25. The Gringotts break in. It happened almost too quickly to notice, and in the film version it barely registered as more than a passing curiosity. A flicker of mystery, gone as soon as it appeared. Hagrid tells Harry almost in passing that someone attempted to break into Gringotts, his exact words. What's interesting is that the same day I was there, someone tried to break into that very vault. Nothing was missing, of course, leave a shadow of intrigue hanging in the air. But it ends there, the story moves on. The vault is mentioned once more, number 713. We are meant to feel that something important happened, but we are not invited to linger. The film trims the mystery, clips the suspicion, and leaves Harry and us without the crucial realization that might have sparked his first real dive into the hidden, darker layers of the magical world. But in the book, J.K. Rowling had other intentions. There, the Gringotts break-in was not just a footnote. It was a thread, long and subtle, pulling Harry deeper into the web of secrets that wrapped around his first year at Hogwarts. The moment was seeded early and allowed to bloom in the fertile ground of Harry's imagination. After leaving the Wizarding Bank, Harry didn't forget the vault. He didn't dismiss the peculiar errand that Hagrid had conducted under strict instructions from Dumbledore. The door to Vault 713 had no keyhole. Hagrid had to stroke it with his finger to make it vanish. Inside there was only a grubby little package, no bigger than his hand. The object seemed almost laughably insignificant, unless one considered the extreme security measures. That image remained in Harry's mind, even as the rush of Diagon Alley faded. And when the Daily Prophet published the news of an attempted robbery at Gringotts, Harry was not a passive observer. He read the article, remembered the date, and the pieces began to click. Rowling wrote, Harry sat and stared at the picture of the goblins. He didn't know why, but something about the story made him feel uneasy. He read the article again. He connected the dots. The break-in had occurred on the same day he and Hagrid had visited the bank. Vault 713 had been emptied mere hours before the thieves struck. That wasn't coincidence. That was design, and Harry knew it. This was more than a plot point. It was Harry's first moment of critical thinking in a world he barely understood. He wasn't just a boy swept away by magic and flying lessons anymore. He was becoming a participant. The movie robbed him of that agency. By skipping over Harry's thought process, it stripped him of a crucial step in his transformation. In the book, he questioned, he analyzed, he wondered. What was so important that it had to be removed just in time? And what would have happened if they hadn't made it in time? These are the seeds of a young detective, planted in the first act of his first year. More importantly, this subtle plotline served as the gateway to a much larger mystery, the Philosopher's Stone. By understanding that the object in the vault was important enough to steal, Harry became attuned to the stakes. Later, when he encountered Nicola Flamel's name on the chocolate frog card, he already had context. His discovery wasn't blind luck, it was part of a chain reaction. The break-in had started a fire in his mind, and each new piece of information fanned the flames. The story was a puzzle, and he was already assembling the corners before the rest of the school had even unwrapped the box. In contrast, the film's Harry is a step behind. He doesn't stumble upon the Philosopher's Stone mystery until it lands almost fully formed in his lap. There is no build-up, no slow climb. The audience, too, is denied the thrill of putting it together alongside him. They are handed a mystery without the joy of its discovery. This might seem minor, but it changes the tone of the entire narrative. In the book, the Philosopher's Stone doesn't just appear as a plot device, it casts a shadow over the whole year. It lingers in the corners of the early chapters, whispering that something is not quite right. Even the nature of the object itself is treated differently. The film leaves it vague and something important, something to be protected. But the book makes it clear this was a matter of life and death. The stone could grant immortality. It could create gold. It was a thing of legend, hidden not just from the Muggle world, but from most wizards. The idea that such an object was sitting under a school, guarded by enchantments and beasts, was absurd, unless, of course, someone was trying to get to it. Unless Dumbledore was right to fear that Voldemort, or what was left of him, was still reaching out with greedy, invisible fingers. The robbery attempt at Gringotts served to raise the curtain on this danger. It showed that someone already knew about the stone and was willing to defy the most secure vaults in wizardkind to obtain it. As Harry mused in the book, why else would someone try to break into a vault that had already been emptied? The answer was chilling in its implication. They didn't know it had been moved. They expected to find it there. That meant the information had leaked. That meant the enemy was active. Another layer that the book captures, and the film does not, is the subtle shift in Harry's understanding of Dumbledore. At first, Harry sees the headmaster as a kind but distant figure. But when he realizes that Dumbledore had orchestrated the removal of the stone just in time, his perception begins to change. The old man wasn't just eccentric, he was calculating. He was playing a long game, and Harry, knowingly or not, had just been part of one of his moves. That realization made Harry cautious. It made him watchful. It began to crack the simple black and white view of the world that he had brought from Privet Drive. The article in the Daily Prophet also introduced Harry to the wizarding press. It showed him how information moved in this new world and how it could be manipulated. The report gave away little. It didn't mention the vault number. It didn't say what had been targeted. But Harry knew better. He saw the gaps. He felt the spin. This wasn't just a magical world. It was a political one with secrets, cover-ups, and people who preferred silence over truth. For a boy raised under the heel of the Dursleys, this was his first taste of the real power of knowledge. That's why the missing details in the film matter. They aren't just scraps of exposition, they are character-building moments. They shape how we see Harry, not as a passenger, but as a thinker, as someone who, despite having no magical background, could connect dots that others missed. Ruling allowed him to grow from within. The story didn't need to hand him answers, it gave him hints and watched what he did with them. Hagrid, too, was more than just a messenger in the book. His discomfort, his attempts to dodge Harry's questions, revealed cracks in the trust that had been placed in him. Harry noticed. He realized that not everyone told the full truth, even friends. That awareness echoed later when he learned about the Mirror of Erised, the stone's final protections, and eventually about his own parents' deaths. Trust had layers. Truth had conditions. The filmmaker's decision to condense the Gringotts plotline stripped the story of that slow burn tension. Without the build-up, the Philosopher's Stone became just another magical object to be fought over in the final act. But in the book, it was a mystery layered in time, danger, and logic. It rewarded readers who paid attention. It rewarded Harry for paying attention. And it reminded us that in Rowling's world, curiosity wasn't just a trait, it was a form of bravery. When Harry finally stands before the Mirror of Erised and sees the stone appear in his pocket, the moment has weight because we know how far he has come to reach it. We've watched him question, doubt, reason, and grow. The stone does not reward innocence, it rewards insight. And that insight began not in the dungeon or the forbidden corridor, but in a newspaper article and a memory of a vault door that melted at a touch. In the end, the Gringotts break-in was more than a theft. It was a spark. It ignited Harry's journey toward understanding the stakes of the wizarding world. It reminded us that even the smallest detail, a vault number, a headline, a grubby package, could lead to revelations of immense power. The film offered us a chase. The book gave us a quest. And in that difference, we see not just two forms of storytelling, but two very different versions of Harry himself. Number 26. Magical classes. In the film adaptation of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the experience of learning magic is condensed into a few carefully selected moments. Hermione mastering the levitation charm, Harry's first exhilarating flight on a broomstick, and a brief, tense glimpse into Professor Snape's potions class. These scenes serve the story, certainly, but they are mere fragments, reduced to snapshots in a sprawling school meant to feel like an entire world. For viewers unfamiliar with the book, Hogwarts becomes less a place of study and more a haunted labyrinth of secrets and staircases. It's a castle where adventures happen, not a school where young minds are shaped by magic. But in the book, Hogwarts is alive with lectures, homework, stress, and the simmering dread of academic failure. It is a fully functioning institution, as enchanting as it is demanding, and every page of Rowling's narrative serves to build the illusion that magic, though fantastical, obeys structure and discipline. One of the most glaring absences from the film is the vivid presence of Professor Sprout and the lessons in herbology. While the movie has no time for her greenhouses and magical flora, the book introduces students to the strange living world of magical plants. In these early classes, students are expected to learn about devil's snare, mandrakes, and a myriad of other magical botanicals that don't merely exist for aesthetic flavor. They are crucial, dangerous, and indispensable to a wizard's education. Harry, Ron, and Hermione carry grimy gloves and soil-covered tools to class, their robes dirtied from digging in enchanted soil. This tactile, earthy magic shows that not all spells are cast with wands and Latin incantations. Some must be pulled from the roots of the earth. And what of Professor McGonagall's transfiguration classes? The film allows us one brief, dazzling moment in which she turns into a cat and startles the students, then reappears in human form, severe and crisp. But after this introduction, the lessons vanish into the background, forgotten. In the book, however, McGonagall's transfiguration classroom is a place of awe and precision. Where magic is difficult, the rules are strict and the consequences for failure are real. Transfiguration is some of the most complex and dangerous magic you will learn at Hogwarts, McGonagall announces in the book. Students are not merely waving wands. They are forced to concentrate, to study, to correct mistakes that turn teacups into half-formed rodents. Magic, the book tells us, is not chaotic power. It is science with soul. Then there's History of Magic, taught by the ghostly Professor Binns, whose lectures are so dull and droning that even the most studious pupils struggle to stay awake. The film skips over this entirely, perhaps fearing to bore its audience as thoroughly as Binns bores his students. Yet in the book, this class serves a vital function. It shows that not all magic is exciting. Some of it is mundane, bureaucratic, dusty. Hogwarts has the dry lectures, the endless note-taking, and the same monotonous drone one might find in any non-magical school. He had been dead for nearly a century, Rowling writes of Binns, but had simply got up to teach the next day, leaving his body behind him. There's a deep, grim humour in that sentence, but also a truth. Hogwarts is still a school, bound by time and tradition, and not every corner glimmers with wonder. Even potions with Snape, one of the more iconic moments captured in the film, is drastically truncated. In the movie, Alan Rickman's cold sneer and menacing presence dominate a single classroom scene. But in the book, Snape is a permanent storm cloud over Harry's first year, a source of anxiety, resentment, and mystery. The classroom is a dungeon, damp and ominous, and the tasks are grueling. Ingredients are exotic, often grotesque. Powdered root of asphodel, infusion of wormwood, bezoars from goat stomachs. Homework is assigned and harshly criticized. Points are docked and tempers flare. Snape's favoritism towards Slytherin and his venom toward Harry make the classroom a battlefield of tension and pride. Every lesson with him is a test of nerve as much as skill. Charms with Professor Flitwick, too, is reduced in the film to a single highlight. The moment Hermione perfects the Wingardium Leviosa spell and Ron mutters his now famous line about pronunciation. But in the book, charms is a rigorous, ongoing subject. Students are taught spells for unlocking doors, lighting objects, and silencing noises. They are expected to remember wand movements, incantations, and magical theory. You need to swish and flick, Flitwick insists in the book, and Hermione listens. She studies, practices, and succeeds not by raw talent, but by the kind of effort that characterizes a real student. The triumph of learning something through dedication is entirely missing from the film's brief portrayal. In the novel, even mundane elements like homework and textbooks serve to enrich the magical world. Students carry heavy volumes like 1,000 magical herbs and fungi, magical draughts and potions, and a beginner's guide to transfiguration. They struggle through essays on moonstone reactions, memorize incantations for practical exams, and worry about whether they'll pass. Rowling doesn't glamorize magic, she grounds it. Learning spells is hard. Students fail, forget lines, burn cauldrons. It's precisely this struggle that makes Hogwarts feel real. The film, eager to keep the pace moving, never shows Harry and his friends poring over parchment by candlelight, sighing over ink stains and frantically flipping pages before class. The library, for instance, is a crucial location in the book, filled with forbidden sections, ancient tomes, and quiet corners where knowledge hums in the air. Hermione spends hours there, researching Nicholas Flamel and other obscure topics. The library is not a backdrop, it's a character, a place of discovery and frustration. The movie brushes past it as a footnote. But in the book, the restricted section is terrifying and thrilling, where books scream when opened and secrets are hidden between dust and leather. Research becomes adventure, and learning becomes power. Knowledge is magic's foundation, not just a shortcut to spectacle. The film's decision to sideline many of these lessons ultimately strips Hogwarts of its depth. It becomes a place where things happen, rather than a place where things are learned. But in the book, every class has its own logic, rhythm, and culture. Students dread some, look forward to others, gossip about grades and punishments. There is a social ecology to the school. The Ravenclaws brag about high marks, the Hufflepuffs groan over Flitwick's quizzes, and everyone knows that Slytherins get away with things in Snape's dungeon. These dynamics build a world far richer than anything that can be conjured in 2 hours of screen time. Tension, too, is part of this educational system. In the book, detentions are real punishments with consequences. Harry and Hermione face danger in the Forbidden Forest, not because it's exciting for the plot, but because that's what Hogwarts does when you break the rules. The lessons aren't just academic, they're moral. Students are constantly learning about bravery, loyalty, rules, and consequences. The school doesn't just teach spells, it teaches character. This is a nuance the film often neglects, preferring peril to discipline. Rowling uses the school's structure to slowly build a believable magical society. The interactions between subjects, the way knowledge in one area informs another, and the progression from basic spells to complex theory all reinforce the idea that magic is an art and a science. This cumulative learning arc is nearly invisible in the film, which treats magic as a set of visual effects rather than a body of knowledge. There's also the ritualistic charm of term schedules, owl-delivered letters, house points tallies, and seasonal feasts. These routines give the book its heartbeat. They remind the reader that magic, while wondrous, exists within structure. The daily repetition of classes, meals, common room chatter, and bedtimes helps root the fantastical in the familiar. Without this, the magic risks feeling hollow. In the film, these elements are hinted at but rarely lingered on. A castle must be lived in to feel real. The book allows us to live in it. Even the emotional rhythms of school life, crushing embarrassment after getting a spell wrong, elation when praised by a teacher, the anxiety before a practical exam, are largely absent from the movie. These are universal experiences, and Rowling embeds them with care. It's not just magic school, it's school, full stop. That recognition deepens the reader's bond with the characters. We know what it feels like to fail in front of others, to hope for praise, to dread a test. The film's lighter treatment distances us from that emotion. What's perhaps most magical about the book is not just the spells, but the belief that learning itself is a kind of magic. Hermione's diligence is not just an academic quirk, it's portrayed as a kind of heroism. Ron's complaints about homework, Harry's gradual improvement, Neville's quiet struggle, all of these arc back to the central idea that education changes people. Hogwarts, at its best, is a place of transformation. The film shows us magical events, the book shows us magical growth, and that makes all the difference.